Welcome to the Spirit and Soul Healing Podcast, where we speak about all things related to spirituality, soul level healing, intuitive guidance, frequencies, and much more. I'm Amy Sikarskie, licensed vocational nurse, past life hypnotherapist, master intuitive energy healer, and a clairvoyant physical channel. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Spirit School Online, where we offer courses in energy therapy, free guided meditations, courses and information around learning to connect in with your spirit guides, and much more. You can find me at amysikarskie.com and offerings at spiritschoolonline.com. Hi, I'm Amy Sikarskie, and welcome to the Spirit and Soul Healing Podcast. Today I'm here with one of my favorite friends, Elijah Garcia. Elijah is an intuitive and Jungian Life Coach. He's passionate about enriching our human experience through the utilization of unique Jungian coaching mythology that introduces divination as a method for personal transformation and reclaiming depth and meaning in our lives. His own personal journey involves diving into the depths of his own shadow, encountering numerous mental health challenges, and eventually choosing to face them head-on with a newfound sense of radical acceptance, resilience, and gratitude. He believes wholeheartedly that no experience on our journey is ever wasted, and with every challenge, obstacle, and difficulty, we're provided the opportunity to derive a deeper sense of meaning. Oh, I love it so much. So much, and I can absolutely relate. I love how you share in your bio that every experience is meaningful and enriching. Yeah. And so I'd love for you to share with us just a little bit about yourself beyond your bio. Who's Elijah? What have you been up to, friend? And what are some of your favorite things of late?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many things have been happening. And it's been, like we were just talking about, probably the most transformative year that I've ever personally experienced, So um, I've just completed my training as a Jungian life coach. So that is primarily kind of where my focus is. But I'm also a mentor in Colette and Reid's virtual school of personal development, Oracle School. And that has been also so life-changing. And I can go deeper into how all that came about. Should we talk about how I got here?
Let's do. I have so many questions already, but let's start at
Okay.
the beginning. How
Okay.
did you get here? You fell from the stars.
Yeah. I think if we want to start at the beginning, I have to go a little bit back because um, it's important to understand, I think, kind of how I got here, that it wasn't just from me maybe, wanting to, it wasn't from anything of desire. Let's just say that, so I'll take it back to my high school years and probably my junior year of high school, actually. And, I had always kind of struggled with mental health in terms of social anxiety and things like that. But it wasn't until that year specifically that it became very detrimental. And I actually began having, panic attacks and anxiety attacks. I couldn't be in class. Like I would ditch, hide in the bathroom. The security would be looking for me all over school. It wasn't the best experience, but bottom line is that I had to actually drop out of high school, and I continued my education online. Um, and following that was just, I consider my journey kind of like what's been called that initiation by fire, or that descent into the underworld where we go through that, we're initiated into the darkness, right? And um, it was following those months when I dropped out of high school, I ended up becoming very isolated. And that led to also a very deep depression. So it was kind of, it wasn't the best results because, as you can imagine, like dealing with social anxiety, I was like, oh, I'm coming I mean, drop me out of school, that's going to be my saving grace. I'll just like be in my house and it'll get better and things like that. But it actually got worse, and it led to depression. The isolation was very deep, and one thing led to another. And I think I kind of hit my rock bottom following that, which was when I decided that I didn't want to be here anymore. And that was kind of like the moment where, even though I didn't want to be here anymore, there was also a part of me that was like, wow, I really need to do something. Like there was still a part of me that was holding on. And I actually remember doing my first meditation following that, probably on, I think I looked it up on YouTube or something. And I was actually just reflecting on this experience recently. It's just really nice to kind of see how these little events led to one thing after another.
Right.
But I just remember being in that meditation space, listening to this music and crying and like having an absolute release. And it was one of my first encounters of being within this um, spiritual space that allowed for me to tap into something that was beyond my personal sense of self. That was probably my first real account of that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then I got into angel cards. And part of that was actually because I was following you. I was following Doreen Virtue, who was a big name at that time. She had all of these angel cards, and she was really big. So I had gotten some of her angel decks, and they became a way for me to again tune into something greater than myself, to kind of bring in a hope that kind of felt depleted from my life. Like didn't really have any sense of meaning. Life felt completely meaningless. Like that's just the absolute truth at that point in time. And so doing these angel cards, it was like, oh wow, like this is really beautiful. And I would feel this energy around me, and it felt like loving, it felt peaceful, it felt so inviting, and it felt like I was at home when I would use these. And I just kept going deeper and deeper. Then my mentor, who's now my mentor, Colette Reid, she came along, and I remember first going on her website. And this was just because I was Googling things, how it goes.
Right.
We're very curious, and Google is the number one source to satiate that curiosity. And I ended up on her website, and she had like these free oracle cards you could choose on there. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I remember picking one, and this is hilarious now looking back at it, but I was like, ew, like what is like what is this card meaning? And it's just because they're two different. I mean, every oracle deck is different, right?
Right.
And at that time, I was just so used to the angelic messages that I had pulled a card that totally called me out on my shit.
Oh.
And it was like, what is this? I was so thrown off, and I was like, I don't like this. And I went off the website, but I kept coming back. I kept coming back. Something kept pulling me back. And now I know, obviously, it's because Colette's specific use of, or the way she makes her divination tools, it utilizes a very psycho-spiritual approach. So there's a lot of Jungian psychology intertwined into it, and it's still very loving, but it'll also like smack you over on the head, right, when it needs to.
Yeah.
And so I ended up taking her courses. She has lots of free stuff, so I was heavily involved in her programs and the stuff that she was putting out, and I just became very invested in divination and oracular tools of communication. And this became a way for me to focus my energy and to also bring my awareness back to the 24 hours that were in front of me. Because again, when you're struggling with mental health, you are lost in a sea of very horrid thoughts and
Right.
emotions, and you're just swamped by
Hmm.
all these different potentials, not the best. And so whenever I would sit down and I would pull a card, it would bring my mind back to what mattered and what was actually true for me. So it became a way for me to ground into the 24-hour containers that were offered each day. And that became my passion because I mean, it really saved my life. Like, I don't know where I would be if I hadn't found all these beautiful mentors like yourself, and um, also a spiritual practice that kept me grounded, right?
Right.
And so we can forward, let's forward time to right now. So so that was what led me on my path of spirituality and this heavy interest in divination and oracle tools. But in the past year, I actually took Colette's personal program of that's called Oracle School.
Okay.
And somehow I got noticed. I still don't know how. I guess I just tend to talk a lot, if you haven't noticed. And long story short, she was like, hey, do you want to? Well, she actually first invited me to be a part of her inspirational panelist on her one of her live events called Oracle Palooza. And in that same, because she pulled it. Okay, so a little quick side story is that we have a headmistress. Her name is Anna Sather. She is beautiful, incredible, and she is Colette's right hand in the school. So she emailed me one day and she was like, hey, you're being summoned to the office and, we would like to meet with you. And I was like, oh, fuck, what did I do? Like, am I getting kicked out? Am I like, did I do something? Did I talk too much?
Oh my gosh.
And um, we ended up meeting on one day and she was like, Colette was there too. And I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? I didn't really expect her, to be there.
Right.
And they were like, hey, do you want to be a part of this inspiration panelist and for the event? And then she was like, also, do you want a job as a mentor for, Oracle School? And I was like, yes, like
Yes, and
obviously.
yes.
And I probably played it off a little bit more cool. I'd like to think anyway, but no, it was, so that was how I also got to be a part of that experience. And it was really special to me because Oracle School is probably the most transformative experience I had ever been in because of the container and the work that Colette had us do. It was like a real safe space for me to just be myself and to do the work, the really deep, heavy work, but in a way that was compassionate, that was, inviting and welcoming, and that didn't feel so heavy.
Mhm.
And that really led me to then an interest in Jungian because Colette has a background in Jungian work and, she talks about it a lot. I was trained in one of her processes called the Envision process that integrates some Jungian psychology in it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to see if this isn't some kind of like coaching model out there, because I mean, you could become a Jungian analyst, but that takes quite a long time and like years. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to do it right now. And besides, I'm not sure I want to work within the therapeutic model, And so I found something that was more in alignment with me, got my Jungian coaching certification, completed that training, and here I am.
Wow. So, where to start? I have so many questions.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing your story with me, with us, with all of us here. I could feel it so much in my heart, when you were talking about your experience as a teenager and everything that got you on your path. And I just kind of was reflecting about my path, also my junior year, throughout my senior year, and similar. Things were a little different. It wasn't anxiety, but it was an overwhelm of life
Yeah.
events. And so I graduated early. Just, I had to get out of there. Like you're like, okay, I can't do this. The
Right.
school system isn't working for me.
Yeah.
So, but that's also when I found, I would say, the start to a new awareness and a deepening to spirit and self, um, through having very intense, challenging moments, like struggling,
Yeah.
like, okay, I feel my energy drop so low. I'm just trying to swim. I'm just trying to survive here.
Mhm.
Um, so that was just very interesting to me to hear that, because I didn't know that part of your story. And so now to hear how far you've come is just incredible. And I'm so happy for you. I love that you have found a approach or courses, training in a way that supports your interests so that you
Yeah.
can help others feeling fully authentic and feeling yourself. And so now you found a way that you can assist others in an authentic, heartfelt space. And how perfect is it that you found Colette, you found her school. She called you out. She's like, "Hey, are you hiding up there? Because the world needs to see your light." Like, she noticed you. And spirit works in the most amazing ways. And I remember when you went on that panel, how excited I was for you. I was like, "Oh my gosh." You could just like feel that that was a very important moment in life. That was an opportunity moment. That was one of those
Mhm.
like ride or die
It
moments.
was
Like you
huge.
take this and you run with it, or if you turn it down, your life could go a completely different way.
Yeah.
And I yeah, and I felt it, and I know you felt it. I mean, it was your life, but I felt it as a friend. I was like, "Oh, I'm so excited for him." And that was just amazing. So, let's fast forward a little bit. Probably I think I had a reading with you shortly after that experience. It might have
Oh,
been right
yeah.
before. It was around that time. And it was,
Mhm.
again, like perfect, just what I needed. And one thing that I really appreciate about oracle cards is that they can tell a story and they'll let you know what's up. Like they really do. There's not a
Yeah.
lot of sugar coating depending on the deck you get, but even at that, it's a very grounded way for you to connect in with spirit, your guides and angels,
Yeah.
whomever you're working with as you're using the cards. Um, but sometimes those messages just kind of like, whoa, wake us up. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I really wasn't thinking of it in that perspective or looking at it in this way. And they can help us go within into a deeper part of ourselves. And I just like, I'm super fascinated by it. I have trained, I trained with Doreen back, back in the day.
Yeah.
And I've trained with a few, like probably four. I took four different angel card classes from four different instructors. So I have extensive training in it. But then my path led me to work with my clair gift of clairvision and clairaudience.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't use the cards as much. And now I'm actually finding a newfound interest in them again and
Mhm.
all the new decks that are out there. I'm thinking, I'm going to age myself here, but
Yeah.
when I first started, there weren't that many authors and decks out there. And now
Right.
it's fascinating. It's incredible. And it's just so exciting to say, like, wow, there's actually a need
Mm.
because people are interested in opening up to this approach of connecting in I feel, a really safe and loving way with
Exactly.
messages from spirit.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I'd like to touch on that briefly because um, it's so true. I think especially with oracle cards, and since they're not a fixed system, like let's say the tarot,
Mm-hmm.
we can have a variety of them, right? And each one is channeled in a unique way through the lens of the author who created them. And so it's beautiful just to see the like you were saying, the variety that's out there now. And it's what I love about them is that they're a real tangible reflection of divine guidance, right? Because the thing is not everyone trusts themselves when they're doing this work. So they might not trust the things that they're feeling, they're intuiting with their clair gifts, but when they use the card, it's you can't really deny those things, especially when you
Right.
get the same card over and over. And it helps because it can even be reflecting a message maybe you got, right? And then you start to build your intuition even more and more using them. So yeah, I think it's incredible for our modern times where we're kind of finding that bridge right now to access that collective consciousness, whether you want to call it spirit, God, goddess is something I use personally, or
Mhm.
anything like that, right? So it's
Right.
just, yeah, it's beautiful.
It is so beautiful. It really is beautiful. And I loved how you were just bringing up the point that they're channeled and the different sets and decks have their own essence, their own vibration. Even if it is the
Yeah.
same author, each deck it has a life to it. You can feel that
Yes.
flowing through.
Yes.
So when you're drawn to a deck, when you're attracted to a deck, there's a reason, there's a message in that deck for you. Um, have you ever done this? Because I have, and so I want to hear if you have about your experience. Have you ever done a reading using multiple card, like multiple decks?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually have it depends on what the reading is about. If it's something that is more, maybe I feel needs more perspectives, and I'll actually include like a council, a council of
Mm.
decks. And we'll kind of be able, what I love about it is that you can see different vantage points. And it's like looking at different facets of a diamond, right? You're getting all
Mhm.
these different perspectives and about a specific subject matter. So it's, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That is a beautiful way to describe it. Absolutely. And it brought up a thought to me, if a question, if you could share with our listeners, what are some of the main themes or topics, like some of the same questions when you have others come to you for a
Mm.
reading or you're tuning in for yourself. What kind of readings or questions do you find are really supported by the cards?
Oh, that's a great question. So definitely, well, I'll say the number one, or let's say the top two subjects that people come to readings for: career, relationships. Relationships is probably number one, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And and the cards are really great at supporting those themes. So I would say the cards speak to career, purpose, our life purpose, relationships, and I don't really do health. I don't feel it. I guess it just depends. I know there's like health decks out there,
Mm.
but in the decks that I use, they don't really approach that subject matter. But there is a way that I kind of um, go around it. Let's say, like, we can see, well, what's the story here, or what's maybe happening on a deeper psychological level that is maybe perpetuating this disharmony in the body, or something like that.
Right, right.
So there are definitely ways to go about any subject matter. I think they can approach anything, but those are probably the top ones that I do consistently, if that makes sense.
Right. Yes, yes, absolutely. And I would just encourage all of our listeners that if they're interested at all, pick up a deck and just have
Oh
fun.
gosh,
Play with
yeah,
it, see how it goes, because I remember you were saying that the safe container and the space that you can click into, it's the way I feel.
yeah,
It's like boom, the energy just comes around and my aura feels so strong. It's kind of like it just clicks, where if I have part of my thoughts on one side of my body and an emotion on the other in my aura, I feel like when you become present in any moment or experience where you're tuning in, you find this soundness within you. And just
yeah.
holding the cards and the deck tells spirit, and it's talking to yourself saying, okay, we're ready. So you're training, your physical body, your
Yeah.
energy body, your guides are like, oh, they're serious. Here we go. We're going to do a
Mhm.
reading. And you can feel the energy shift within yourself. And then as you're connecting with the cards, you feel the energy of the cards begin to speak to you.
Oh,
So,
yes. I love that you said that, because it's so it's so true. It's when you have a deck and you are intending to consult an oracle, you enter into what has been called oracular space, right? All of a sudden you're in this different frequency, in this different mode of being. And actually, Jungians have a term, something that happens is called ego relativization. And all that means is that you're basically saying, I don't have all the answers.
Mm.
And the ego's dominance or the ego's hold on you back, it like it loosens up, right? And so then just from that alone, you can access um, a deeper knowing within you, right? Because we're always in that egoic sense of self and thinking we know it all, blah, 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 and this and that. But the minute we consult an oracle, we're actually allowing ourselves to take a step back and tune into something greater. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I'm seeing this whole vision of how it can really play out, because then when you work with the cards and you separate yourself from that tension and that, that fear, that ego control, and you just let yourself relax, what happens is that it begins to influence your life. So day after
Yeah.
day, week after week, and it
Yes.
helps you as you're shifting your awareness and your consciousness. Your energy is also shifting and your ego is softening, so that then you can see and hear messages throughout the day in a more receptive way outside of
Mm,
going to your cards. But then it's like, oh, I feel a shift. Okay, I recognize this vibration, and it typically comes in when I sit with the cards. But here I am, like in my yard, and I feel it, or I'm doing laundry and I feel that shift come in. So you
yes.
can recognize, oh, maybe there's a message from spirit coming through that, that wants to come through, or maybe it's just that vibration of support and peace and love. But also it
Yeah.
flows into when you're out and about and you're at the store and you're driving and you can see signs, and you're more
Yeah.
receptive to recognizing or opening to the possibility that maybe that's a sign for me. So,
Right. I
yeah.
love that you said that because I was going to say as well, like when you enter that oracular space and you begin to use these tools, and like you said, the softening of the ego begins to happen, right? And but then you start opening to the possibility of something greater than yourself. And again, that could be seen as a multitude of things. I say goddess, I say spirit, all these different things.
Mm.
But the point is, you start entering a new space of awareness like, oh, I'm not doing this alone. Maybe what if I'm in a co-creative partnership with
Right.
something that is greater than my personal self? And then you start opening to see signs and see things in nature or whatever it may be, because those are also oracles, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love how you're pulling in the Jungian
Oh yeah,
information.
got it.
It's so intriguing. I haven't studied,
You know, I love Jung's work because he was one of the first, I feel, psychologists who really wasn't afraid to go there, into the realms. He kind of bridged the gap that was missing between psychology and spirituality, whereas others, maybe like Freud, he's a great guy, nothing against him, but he was like, he was an atheist. He wanted the psyche to be seen in a certain way. He wanted all these more rigid approaches, whereas he was more open to just curiosity. He really embraced curiosity, and he left a very incredible legacy for us to kind of look at. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and now I'm fascinated. I'm feeling like, okay, Amy, when you get some free time, or maybe I need to make that free time to start studying a little bit and learning more about his work.
Oh, I got loads of books for you or anything. So just tell me when.
So this is what I wanted to share. And then I'd love to hear your insights on it with your experiences. But when we can receive messages and support and signs, the oracles can really support individuals and also in group settings. And so when you're coming in for a reading that's like maybe a gallery reading or an online Instagram live or
Yeah.
here on a podcast,
Mhm.
the messages that come through will be really supportive. And you might find that the whole message really is resonating for you. Or you might find that there's one, two, or three aspects of it that really are for you. So you take what resonates with you, obviously, and just kind of leave the rest. But I would say be open to the interesting aspect of you just might find that this message has found you at the right time and space,
Yeah.
and it's meant for you.
And one thing that I am always talking about is, our own inner oracle and our own oracular consciousness, because we can see signs everywhere, I mean, but it's really our own inner oracle that tunes into something that is meant for us, right? That our relationship with oracles is as dependent on us as we are with them,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So it's taking what resonates and leave the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a little message come through yesterday, and it kind of reminds me of it now. One way that I'm seeing this is that when you resonate with a particular card, it's really just enhancing that frequency that's already in
Yeah.
you. It's just like
Yes.
letting you, it's just like
Yeah.
bringing it through to your conscious
Mhm.
awareness, that human conscious awareness.
Mhm.
Um, so that is something else to think about you when you really find like, oh, that is speaking directly to me because it's actually showing me something that I already was experiencing. I just
Yeah.
like it just clicks, it just puts it
Exactly.
together, brings it to the forefront.
Right. So we could ask, I had my deck right here because I was hoping you would ask me, but I didn't think you would. But we could ask even a question that is like, how can we be more receptive to receive oracles in our day-to-day life?
Oh, I love that.
What do you think?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How can we be more receptive? And for the sake of time, I'll just pull the card because usually I take a damn long time. Okay. What can we do to be interesting? Okay. Hmm. Okay. So I pulled the first card is the serpent.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And it is the terms on the card are knowledge and healing. But I also pulled the cat.
Wow.
It's so cute. I don't think you can see it, and that's independence and healthy boundaries. So, what's really interesting about the serpent is one, well, for me personally, the serpent has always been, well, we actually know this historically, that the serpent has been a representation of the goddess and the ancient tools that we use to communicate with her, right? Oracular communication, all of that stuff. So, in order to be more receptive to the signs around us, we also have to be open to our own healing as well, and into doing the work, because um and I'm actually, oh, this is going to be a deep topic, but stam cards, right? They always bring up the deep stuff.
Oh,
So
they do.
yeah, so I'm really allowing the message to flow through, and it's about when, because if you remember what I was saying earlier, is that we can see signs everywhere if we want to. Like, you've probably experienced the people who maybe want to see only what they want to see and don't necessarily allow the truth to actually come through, because the truth
Mm-hmm.
is we can influence what we see in the outer world in terms of
Yes.
signs and omens and things like that, right?
Yes.
So in order to be more receptive on the best level that is in alignment with your highest good, we have to be open to them not always being um, what we want to hear. And does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yes.
I want to hear what you were going to say, though,
Oh
because
my
I know
gosh.
when you saw the serpent.
I don't know if it's gonna derail. I mean, I have a whole story.
Okay,
So
okay, let's go with stories.
go.
Let's
Okay.
go with stories.
I just about like my heart stopped because I had a dream last night.
Mm.
And I remember I actually woke up before my alarm. I couldn't go back, and it's so fresh. Like it was just hasn't faded, you know? And I was out in a yard. It wasn't even my yard. There was grass and there were serpents. There were at
Oh
least
my
two, maybe
gosh.
three. I don't recall ever having a dream of snakes. Like, I'm like, this is so interesting. And then my cat was in the dream.
No.
Yes, that's why I was like, "What? A serpent and a cat? Are you kidding? This is like, whoa!" I must have
What?
been tuning into something here, and I just remember. So this is going to be interesting. You know how you can analyze dreams, but I remember feeling like, is my cat going to be safe? Like, is she
Mm.
okay? Does she know how to play with the serpent? Does she know to recognize?
Mm.
Is this a new encounter? But yeah, when you pulled those two cards, I was like, "Ooh, I'm thinking that was more than just like a dream." You know, I and as you were pulling the cards, if anybody is watching on YouTube the video, I could feel the energy shift around me. I just had to close my eyes and be so present with it. And then I heard in my mind, soften, as a message, like, how can we be more receptive? Soften.
Mm.
And as I relaxed just a little bit more, I kind of felt some energy release from the back of my heart.
Mm.
And then, like within moments, you pulled those cards. And so I'm thinking, wow, there's something deep to this. And
Yeah.
everything you're saying is just like layering on it, where it's probably going to take me a little bit of time to integrate and really
Yeah.
feel into this message. But I mean, what is your take on that? Having I had this dream early morning,
Well,
and here.
that's beautiful. In in the Jungian coaching model and in Jungian work in general, we actually utilize dream interpretation because it's such a dreams can be oracles. Dreams are
Mm-hmm.
oracles in my
Mm-hmm.
my opinion. And they become a way for us to kind of access the unconscious and what is going on beneath the surface that we aren't always open to in our day-to-day waking life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the serpent is a really powerful kind of um, symbol that often shows up in dreams during periods of, well, again, it depends on each person, because within the Jungian model we acknowledge that although symbols and animal totems and things like that can kind of have a universal and archetypal meaning, we also stress the importance of the individual's own relationship to that symbol and where they currently are in their life, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Right.
So within Jungian dream work, we also see them as aspects of our own unconscious and what's going on with us as reflections of our own self. And with the snake, it's been known as um, it's a source of knowledge. But it's higher wisdom,
Yeah.
right? It's like the spiritual knowledge that in the myth of Adam and Eve, for example, we were forbidden to access, right? It became demonized and things like that. But it's saying that you are at a point in your journey where this is going to become more available to you. And it's also a sign of healing too,
Mm-hmm.
which is really fascinating because I mean, I know we've been talking behind the scenes and we know that there's a lot going on.
Yes.
Um, but that's a very, very good symbol, in my opinion, to receive.
Right.
And the cat, and I'm just going off kind of archetypal symbolism, of
Mm-hmm.
course, so this is just general, but with a cat it often represents um I believe, like, let's say independence, or which is what the card says, but it can also represent intuition. And if I were to get a cat, again, I would see that as a symbol of the goddess because that's my personal
Mm-hmm.
association, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
just, we could do a session on this sometime. You got to hit me up. You got to,
Absolutely.
because
Yes.
dream work is deep and it's huge. And we get access to a whole other world when we allow ourselves to kind of see the messages that come through. But I'm actually going to read these again So when we're talking about how can we be more receptive to the signs and the omens, this is about connecting to the deepest part of us that knows this language. When we talk about um, receiving signs in nature, this is something that has always been a part of human nature. If we go back to ancient beliefs that talk about the anima mundi, for example, or the ensouled world, where we believed that we are intrinsically connected to everything that is outside of us, right? And it's connected to us internally. And the serpent is about accessing that hidden knowledge and that awareness that can tune into that because it's a part of us. It's
Mm-hmm.
so natural. And if we look at I really like that I pulled this too. This might be a long segue, we'll see. But when we talk about the serpent and how it's always been a symbol of the goddess, I also think about where divination and oracles kind of began, which is, I mean, we don't have a definitive answer of where divination began, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that it probably took place in the ancient goddess cultures within the Paleolithic and the Neolithic times. So this is like the Paleolithic, I think, was 30,000 years ago, and the Neolithic was over 10,000 years ago or something like that. So since the beginning of humankind, we have always had ways of contacting a higher power, and divination or oracles were the way in which we put ourselves in that dialogue, right? And we inserted ourselves in that dialogue or initiated it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about the serpent and being more open, I'm also really loving what you said was the gentleness, right? Allowing ourselves to be gentle and to step into that healing space where we acknowledge that we are in a co-creative partnership with spirit and that we are not the ones doing it, right?
Right.
Because if we get into our heads about oh, is this real or blah, 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 kind of overanalyzing things, then we'll just block the signs. I don't think you have to believe in them to receive them, but I think you have to be willing to be curious
Mm-hmm.
in order to open up to the wisdom of the universe and oracles, right?
Right.
And what I love about the cat too is the healthy boundaries part. So I think it's also knowing, and this is something you taught me, Amy, because I I am very I will forget to close up and forget to be human for a bit. And I think the way we can keep in that safe, beautiful, healing space is if we have those healthy boundaries with ourselves and with spirit, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of, maybe you can touch on that a little bit more because I know that's kind of, I mean, that's something you've always taught me, right?
Right. Yeah. I think, well, it can really affect every aspect of our life. So when we're working with spirit, we want boundaries to say, am I available right now to communicate with other non-physical beings?
Yeah.
Like am I processing something within myself where I want to just kind of like work solely with myself, or am I open to, like maybe your grandmother coming in and working with you, these kinds of things. And so that's just when you're hanging out doing your thing and you might feel a spirit around. So having a boundary is just saying, oh, I'm not available right now, or I'm not interested, or sure, I am.
Right.
Um, so when we work with spirit and you're receiving just day to day kind of stuff, that's an example. When you're opening and you're sitting or you're beginning a reading or a healing session with intention that, this is what we're doing, and then you open your awareness to the spirit realm, then you have the boundaries to discern and to state what vibrational frequency do you want to access for information. So, who are you working with? Are you working with your higher self and the person you're reading for, their higher self solely, higher self to higher self, or do you invite in an archangel, spirit guides, ascended masters, or do you notice that their loved ones are showing up? So it's a whole experience of being able to understand energies and letting through the messages from a
Right.
source that you feel comfortable with. And so that's a form of autonomy and boundaries. And then in our personal life, human to human, it's also, am I available right now?
Mm,
How much time do I have where I won't feel that I'm doing myself a disservice and getting depleted? And what relationships are beneficial? It's like I used to always put others first. You give and you give kind of a thing, and then to that, then you start to feel the effects of it. So now I'm kind of like, okay, looking at everything in my personal life a little bit different. Like, oh, I love everybody so much, but there's only so many hours in the day. So I just do my best, and I'll send a little love heart and through the air
yeah.
if I'm physically unavailable because of timing. But that's another boundary to put up. And not only that, like with relationships, there's also boundaries with our habits. So boundaries with time, like, are you going to get stuck on social media or watching a movie? Like
Mm.
boundaries with food. Like, okay, I think I've had enough of the ice cream, or whatever. Like, okay, one
Yup.
bite and we're good. Whatever it might be,
Advice
so
later.
yeah. So it's just keeping ourselves accountable and also setting that boundary, that line, that
Yeah.
delineation of the energy, and being a real sensitive, empathic, energetic person. It's very helpful so we can stay clear, present, and understand what we're dealing with and navigating and working with our frequencies that we want to, and not feeling like we're being taken by a ride from the energy of a
Mm,
spirit or
mhm.
the moment of the food, and it get out of control,
Yeah.
or relationships. So to me, those are some examples of the boundaries, and
I
cats
love
are
that.
amazing.
I love that. And something, kind of just quickly came to me while you were talking. And, like with everything, there is just like the universe itself, there's a creative, regenerative aspect. And there's the more shadow, destructive
Yeah.
element that is just within everything, right? And I think within oracles, and maybe the reason why this card came up when talking to the listeners that are going to be listening to your podcast is because I know they're all open, right? I know everybody who's listening is so into this work and is so into, communing with the divine and all these things. But I think it's just knowing, like you were saying, the boundaries and also not becoming so dependent
Right.
on needing them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can also get into that whole thing where, oh, I'm definitely not taking this opportunity until I see this very specific thing. And, and just getting so much in your head about it to then all it becomes is your ego's way of hijacking your spiritual practice, right? That's what it ends up
Right.
doing. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely a big topic.
absolutely. It reminds me of what you shared a moment ago. And so I'm just going to reiterate that, your intuition, your heart, your soul, however you connect in with spirit, is like the number one way of it. And so we use oracle cards and other tools, and we can go to others for readings, for insights and aspects and enhancements to that knowing. And it can help us if we feel a little confused, but never give over like your free will, your autonomy, your
Exactly.
sovereignty. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, working with the public, you get questions that you're kind of like, "Whoa, wait a minute," or on social media, you'll see comments, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, like that's a very interesting perspective because it's not even part of my reality."
Right.
But we all have our own experiences and truths, and so I would love to hear how you how you navigate through, or what your response would be for somebody that feels fearful, or they might not have the most kind things to say about working with spirit or the oracle cards specifically.
Right. So this is definitely a deep layered question because I think on one level, it's important that I mean, intuitives or anybody who is interested in really in this world, that we come to a place where that sort of thing doesn't really affect us. Because the thing
Mhm.
is, there's always going to be people who are calling us, um, whatever the case may be. I'm sure you've heard it. I've heard it. The man downstairs gets
Yeah, yeah.
involved and it gets inserted into the convo.
And you're
But
like, "Wait,
also,
I don't even know that person."
right, like what are
Like,
you
what?
talking about? But my personal also interest is around educating people into also why oracles and divination kind of became demonized. So I try and put as much information about that out there as possible. And I've noticed,
Mhm.
not everyone's going to be open to the education. They'll just shoo it away. And some people will be like, oh, that's interesting. But maybe we could talk about that for
Yeah,
a
I'm
second.
I'm one of those where, "Oh, that's interesting, share." I'm very
Yeah.
fascinated.
So
Yeah.
So when I was talking about earlier the ancient goddess cultures that existed within the Paleolithic and the Neolithic time periods, um, women and women had a primary central role within the spirituality of that time. And part of it was divination practices, right? Part of those spiritual practices included divination, oracles, and obviously it looked different than the cards that we have now.
Yeah.
Could have been interpreting flashes of lightning or consulting rocks and, things like that.
Mhm.
But it's important that we know that women played a primary role in the society of that time. And the way that we kind of the model of society was a partnership society, and this is the work of Riane Eisler. So later on, I'll give you the name of the books that you can link
Oh,
to
yeah.
to
Links
our
are in the show
guests
notes.
and
Yes.
the show notes. But basically, we had a time period where archaeologists and anthropologists kind of have found evidence that it was kind of a egalitarian society. So men and women were seen as equals,
Mhm.
but women played a primary role when it came to the spirituality. And they worshipped a goddess because, I mean, if you can imagine, it's kind of just common sense, right? As these people were first becoming aware of themselves, aware of their relationship to nature and to humans, obviously someone must have seen a woman and said, oh my gosh, she literally can give life. So it just made sense, right? And we
Right.
we see this with the Venus figurines that were also found all throughout prehistoric Europe. So, although it can still be debated whether or not it was a goddess, because there will still be people that say there were sex objects or things like that, we
Mhm.
do know from all the evidence that's coming out that it's really likely it was the worship of a goddess, right? It was the
Mhm.
worship of a mother goddess who gave life, who sustained life, and all of those things. But during, I think it was the fifth millennium before the Common Era, we start to see a change in these civilizations. So nomadic tribes started growing in numbers and started invading these places and these goddess worshiping societies. And with them, they brought these war gods and the god of war. And these became known as the Indo Europeans, and they started putting their beliefs on everyone. And we can actually see this happen within the Bible. Like we read about the villages that were destroyed and burned down. We read about the golden calf that was demonized, and I forgot who said it, but they were like, don't, we don't worship this bad. But that was actually a symbol of the goddess. And
Mhm.
so was the snake. And we see how their creation story that they brought with them demonized the snake, right? And so
Right.
then you start to see these little shifts in ideologies with these um, Indo-Europeans that brought their war gods, and then there was also the Hebrews, which was another set of nomadic tribes. And they invaded, I think it was Canaan. It was this really ancient city, Canaan, and they also brought with them the war gods. So, so long story short, they wiped the goddess culture out. They wiped a lot of that out. And when they were forcing their ideologies on the new way of being, they also demonized divination, and they demonized oracles, because this became a way, or this was their way to access that higher power, right? And
Mm-hmm.
obviously they didn't believe in that. They believed in this one god, who was a who was male and was aggressive and things like that. Like, these people were warlike, they were
Right.
warriors, and the civilizations that worship the goddess were not. They So we also see a big change in society around that time too,
Mm-hmm.
where we went from a partnership role to more of a dominator role, where we went from worshiping the life-giving element of nature and the creatrix to now worshiping the power of the blade and the power to take life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the bottom line of what happened. And obviously so much came out of that. I mean, we still see people today that really hold firm to the beliefs that these really natural practices are evil. But it was just imposed, from these people who had a certain set of beliefs. And obviously that became the more dominant and widely accepted point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really fascinating. I remember going through the research and going through the books and like crying, and like I had so much anger too. Like, I actually had a lot of anger come up, and maybe this is because of past life. I don't know why, but um it was a lot to see, and a lot to kind of witness how these ancient practices became demonized. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
Right.
there's a lot of history there for sure.
There is a lot of history, and what I'm feeling is like, okay, so there are many of us now that really resonate with working with oracle cards and our own soul light, connecting with God, goddess, our guides in any way that we feel is really natural.
Yeah.
And I think that in this life, many of us are pushing through that barrier that in the past would have held us back, whether it have been safety or knowledge and awareness, ridicule, even, whatever it might have
Yeah.
been. And so understanding the history of like how was it that humanity and society separated away, what were some of those
Mm,
elements and aspects, and we can see it now and understand and conceptualize, and that also can help heal and shift and help the subconscious, that soul vibrational frequency that might have spanned across time, and there's an aspect of ourself that really felt it. Like you get
mhm.
emotional. Well, there's a reason you're emotional. You had to tie to something in the
Yeah.
past, and
Right.
now's an opportunity to heal, grieve, have that sadness, let the emotion flow through, and then take back your power in the way that you become, your own perspectives, your own practice.
Mhm.
You are able to implement that now in this life.
Yeah.
You're able to step into that, and you become that fullness of what is like your inner wisdom, your beauty, all of the energy that comes through in your own personal practice can really start to breathe now
Yeah.
and shine. And it's like this awakening where you feel it ignite within you. You can feel your heart open. You can feel the light and the love come in. And it's also emotional. As I mentioned, it can be very emotional to feel the
Yeah.
grief, the sorrow, the sadness, the anger, and then to let that go, to recognize it, honor it, and then to honor it is also an approach that you can take, is to then actually go back and use your form of spiritual divination and connection, and let yourself know like it's okay now. So
Yeah.
stepping slowly into it and utilizing the gifts that you really felt that maybe in the past you were pulled away from for safety or whatever it might have been. But if your heart's calling and feeling and you're really drawn to it in this life, actually going through the process of healing and stepping more into it will help you connect deeper with your inner self, with your soul, which will enhance your intuition and begin to help you to support your life mission, your path, your purpose for being here. It
Right.
all is connected.
Yeah. I love that you said that. It's so important. And um, like you said, there we can face ridicule, you know. Um, I think these practices and everything's starting to become more mainstream, which is beautiful to see. But there's still we can still face that. And so
Yeah.
coming to terms, I think, with our own aspects of ourselves that need healing and maybe faced a past life where I do believe I was a part of the goddess, some of the goddess cultures that were wiped out because the emotions that I felt and can still feel sometimes, it's like I
Yeah.
was there. Like you ended me, you know, like you took away something that was so sacred to me. And right. And so I know a lot of people listening might relate to um, having that fear of ridicule because of past lives and things like that, right?
Right.
So I really love that you talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, I have felt the depth of all emotions in our little visit today. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming on and really visiting and sharing your story and shedding some insights and wisdom. For those that want to work with you, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at I am Elijah Garcia. You can find me on Facebook at Elijah Garcia Coaching. And you can head to my website, ElijahGarciaCoaching.com. And that's when you can find more about me, my services. And, if you have any questions, you could always DM me or something like that. But yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if you had one message from your heart to share with our listeners before we close today, what would that be?
Mhm. Know thyself. Like
Mm,
the ancient oracle of Delphi says, know thyself. I think that's so important as we move forward in this new world and um, with all the uncertainty we've had in the past few years. I think we've had an opportunity to know ourselves on a deeper level.
mhm.
And in order to get to the next stage, we all have to be really in tune with who we are on that deep soul, authentic level. And yeah, I think that would
Yes.
be.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I can feel the power of your words just like really resonate and
Oh,
light up my chakras, and I can feel the depth of it. Thank you so much, Elijah. Thank you so much for being
thank
here.
you so much for having me.
And thank you for being here with us today on our episode on oracles. If you enjoyed our episode and would like to share it with a friend or family member, I really appreciate it. And also, please give a like or 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on. This helps others find the information for their own healing, inner development, and growth. And I'll see you again on the next episode. Da da da, da da da.